Welcome to this video tutorial with Virtual Racing School for the Blancpain series on iRacing. This week we head to Zolder, a circuit of two halves with a fast and flowing opening sequence followed by several slower, tricky chicanes. I'll be looking at a lap driven by Rens Broekman with the Mercedes AMG GT3, for which he has driven in default afternoon weather to match the official series. I'll play the lap in full for you first before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 1 minute 28.313. Okay, so starting off then from the VRS app, from the list of data packs, choose the AMG data pack as driven by Rens Broekman, and scroll down to the week 11 data pack. It's going to load up the session details, where of course you can download the lap files, the replay and the sprint race fuel setup. For this we're just going to click on Learn Track, which is going to load the driving analyzer. It's going to start to play the lap through. I'm just going to pause it, and for those of you who might be unfamiliar with what we are seeing here, you've got a steering angle inputs trace across the duration of the lap, as well as a speed trace and brake and throttle input traces, and finally some live driving inputs down here. So I'm just going to click on Sector 1, which is always the run from the start-finish line to the braking zone for Turn 1, and I'm also going to reduce it to half speed and mute it and play it through. So you've got this Coca-Cola sponsorship on the right hand side. A few car lengths before that ends is going to be your braking point for Turn 1, and basically you want to get as close to the wall there as you possibly can without obviously getting an incident or damaging your car by accidentally hitting it, which I have done. So braking hard initially, down a couple of gears, down one gear initially, and then as you turn in, which is going to be just after that sponsorship finishes, you'll immediately want to bleed off the brakes, but don't bleed off completely, and as you turn in more and more you bleed off more and more, and you're aiming for this very, very short apex curb on the inside here, where you can get the whole car over the top. Let's just show you that from chase view. So that's quite nice. So you want kind of the white line at the edge of the curb, roughly on the center line of the car. That's pretty much the ideal positioning. Obviously you're not going to get that perfect every time, and then pick up the throttle as you apex, exercising a little bit of patience, waiting for the car to settle before then committing to full throttle, and also opening the steering, opening the car up, and taking advantage of this curb on the exit, which has a little bit of extra room. I think it's green painted concrete on the exit, which you can take advantage of before then bringing the car back over to the left hand side for braking for Turn 2, which is going to be a very gentle braking zone, quite brief as well. There's not really much of a reference here. We've just passed the pit lane exit. You could use that as a reference. So down into third gear again, right over from the left hand side of the circuit when you turn in, and it's a very, very long corner with a late second apex. So take a bit of time to make it to this first apex, don't rush it, keep braking all the way into the apex, and in this case Rens picks up the throttle just before the apex, which we can see here, but he doesn't commit to full throttle straight away, increases a little bit, and then just before the exit curve he finally commits to full throttle, and then anticipates a little bit of oversteer. You can see some minor corrections in the steering trace from Rens, and run out to these sort of anti-cut curbs on the exit. Obviously you don't want to run over those, they can be quite nasty. And then the second apex is going to be here, so aiming at this tower in the distance, that's going to be your second apex, and you're still kind of tracking out on a wide arc out to the edge of the circuit by the time this curb on the outside ends. And then your braking zone for turn 4, which is another fast sweeping right-hander, is going to be just before this access road on the left here. So down into fourth gear on entry, again very short braking zone, and then kind of bleeding off quite early on because you have to turn in very shortly after braking, and then braking all the way into the apex, making sure that you're not too fast in the middle of the corner so that you can get hard on the power just before the apex for the best possible exit. And again, getting as close as possible to these, I'm going to call them anti-cut curbs, these harsh ones on the right hand side, and then open the steering up as you feel for some oversteer, which isn't really until Rens reaches full throttle. So you can see he keeps the steering lock on whilst sort of feathering the throttle at about 80-90%, and then by the time the corner opens out and he finally commits to full throttle, he has to abruptly open up the steering in anticipation of oversteer. That's quite neat and tidy, to be honest, and no reason to drop any wheels on the gravel there, which you can get away with actually there if need be, just as long as you've got the car nice and straight. So down into the first of several chicanes now. Braking is going to be just after the 100 marker, which we've just passed on the right there. One of the heavier braking zones on the circuit. Turning in roughly halfway along this red and white painted wall. It's more like near the end of it, in fact, isn't it? You don't want to turn in too early, and the reason is as you bleed off those brakes again as normal. So yeah, it literally is just before the wall ends is going to be your turn in. And then now this first apex, you want to avoid these white anti-cut curb strips, so you want to get as close to them as possible, but again, don't make contact with them. They're very aggressive, and they will definitely upset the balance of the car, which is okay on the exit, but the first apex is important to miss them. And then so just after the first apex there, Rens is picking up the throttle, but he's being a bit more cautious than normal, I would say, purely because of the reason of waiting for the car to settle and sort of anticipating how it's going to land. And then this second apex, you can use one or two of those white anti-cut curbs, and as long as you keep the car nice and straight, it should settle quite quickly. And again, you need to use all of the track on the exit to keep the car nice and straight, so that you're sort of least likely to induce some nasty oversteer. Over the crest then, you can allow the car sort of towards the middle of the circuit, which kind of opens up the entry into the braking zone for this right, left, right chicane sequence. And braking in terms of reference, again you've got a red and white painted wall on the left. Pretty much as you get alongside there, that's going to be your braking zone into here. And so brake in a straight line, which should put you on this outside entry curb initially, and then shortly before that ends you want to turn in, and again bleeding off the brakes down into second gear. And in terms of car positioning, throughout this whole sort of sequence, of 3 apexes, you'll have these anti-cut strips again, and pretty much perfect positioning is going to be about half the edge of the car. The inside edge needs to be about halfway along them, so roughly the edge of the car in the middle of the curb. You'll see that there, and you need to be quite quiet with the pedals through here, and you need to be quite quick with your steering. Just be aware that you don't want to upset the balance of the car by being too aggressive. So it's kind of a compromise that you need to find to get your line right, to get your speed down enough so that you can navigate through here as efficiently as possible. And again, so the edge of the car is halfway along the white anti-cut curbs, and again through this right-hander as well. And obviously the right-hander is an acceleration zone for, this is kind of the whole turn 7 sequence. So we'll take it to on board. So it's important to not turn in too late here. You want to make sure that you just clip those white curbs on the inside, which can be quite nasty, but that is very important to getting a good exit. And so we've not reached full throttle. Rens is just modulating the throttle at this point, allowing the car, opening the car up out onto this exit curb, where he does briefly reach full throttle up into 3rd gear now as well. And then through this sort of banked right-hander, there's a lot of grip here, but it's still not quite possible to make it through here flat out, provided you've exited the previous corner with a decent amount of speed, as Rens has done. So you can see that he's just feathering back out to about 80% here, and then modulating through the apex before then finally committing to full throttle on the exit. And again, getting as close as possible to these anti-cut curbs without actually making contact with them. I think he just brushed the inside there, but got away with it. And using all of the track on the exit, including a bit of this curb on the left hand side, that's okay. Just be aware of dropping wheels into the grass. And then obviously keep the car nice and tight, hug the left hand side down towards the heaviest braking zone on the circuit, into the hairpin, which is going to be just before the 100 meter marker. Braking hard all the way down into 2nd gear, keeping the car out wide in a straight line. Don't turn in too early, and also don't carry too much apex speed. So keep braking all the way into the middle of this corner. Try and pick up the curb on the inside if you can. That is the perfect line. Any more than that and it would unsettle the car. And then on the exit, as you pick up the throttle, initially you want to be really quick and aggressive. So we can see like that initial spike on the throttle, and then Rens modulates and opens the car up to try and avoid wheel spin. So the initial spike is to keep the car rotating, and then obviously the modulation is to be on the limit of traction and not over. So obviously you don't want to use the traction control too much. And then on the exit, take advantage of this curb here. Just straight line through this. It's not really a corner, but it is turn 9 apparently, towards the final chicane on the circuit then, where we're going to brake just before this gantry, so after the 100 marker. So we're going to turn, or sector 9 for that, turn 10, and again braking quite hard in a straight line down into 2nd gear. Now you've got these anti-cut curbs again on the inside. You want to get as close to them as possible, but don't touch them, not through here, because it will unsettle the car too much and make it very difficult for you to exit properly out of the last corner. Obviously the exit is very important as you have a decent length straight. So braking all the way into the apex, again picking up the throttle, being careful with the throttle, so quickly to 50% or so, and then kind of modulating and feathering, waiting, and then setting up the line so that you do actually again have the inside edge of the car about halfway over the inside of these white curbs. So as he's on the curb, he feathers out to about 40%, and you do tend to struggle with traction out of here normally, so just be aware of that. Be patient with the throttle, try and straighten up the steering as early as possible, and we can see in the steering trace that Rens is doing that, anticipating some oversteer and using all of the track for the best and neatest possible acceleration out of the last corner, and across the line to complete the lap. You can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with world champions from the likes of Commander Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.